Hey everyone, welcome to my escape. Today I'm going to do another booktube tag because they're fun and I got tagged in another one and I really enjoy them. So Randy Ray from the Literate Texan, he tagged me in this one, so thank you for that. And it is the top 10 Star Trek tag, the original series edition, which is a bit weird because I haven't seen the original Star Trek, but that's fine, we'll bypass that. I apparently don't need to, and I watched the Orville, which is basically a commentary spin-off of Star Trek, so I think that's all we need to know. Also, if you liked Star Trek, go watch the Orville if you haven't already, because it's literally great and fantastic and everything you need. So, for this tag, it's 10 questions based off of 10 episodes from the original series, big themes that happened in these episodes, my kind of stories with them, and then books I think you like that kind of idea that would go along best with them. Question 10 is based off of the episode called Requiem for Methuselah by Jerome Bixby. And the question is, would you live forever if you could? So me personally, no, I would not live forever if I could. There's too many dystopian, science fiction, fantasies out there, all of them being warning stories of you don't want to live forever, okay? You mess up the growth of society, you're bored, you're lonely, you're often hunted. It's really just not worth it to me. Life is better when it's short and sweet kind of thing. And, you know, having that end date, I think really like propels you to get the most done that you possibly can. And I just, eternity sounds awful to me. No, thank you. So I'm currently reading The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue, and I thought this was a great kind of slide in there for this question because it is a different take on immortality, I would say. So Addie, our main character, is born in the 1600s, and she makes a deal with a dark god, basically for immortality and eternal youth. The dark god gives her this in exchange for her soul, but there's a caveat. So she can exist forever, she'll never age until she's, you know, ready to go, but no one can remember her. So as soon as she has an interaction with a person and they leave, so she's not in their eyesight, they will immediately forget her. Everything they talked about, that she even existed, everything. She cannot create anything, she can't destroy anything. She literally is just out here existing in this horrible, awful, lonely existence. So it's not quite, you know, your regular story of like a vampire that lives forever and has all this strength and all this power and everything, but it was really a good look at like a regular person for the most part, and then having to live through forever but cannot make your mark on time because you don't belong to time. So if you're not bound by time, how do you make a mark on it? I thought, you know, the metaphors and everything and the commentary on time and being bound to something and to someone was really interesting. But if you like that kind of immortality, eternal kind of theme, kind of trope, I would check this out because it's definitely a different take. Number 9 is based off of The Balance of Terror by Paul Schneider, and the question of it is, what are some of your favorite novels about unlikely friendships? Have you ever had one yourself? I've had lots of unlikely friendships. I think most people do just because of work. Coworkers are always very diverse, and if you're just like in school or mingling with like friends of friends, you probably would never end up in their circles, but really work is what brings you together. Yeah, I have a lot of good friends I've made through work that wouldn't really necessarily cross my path in that instance outside of work. So I had a lot of books that kind of looked at friendship, but one that really stuck in my head as unlikely friendships was The Well of Ascension by Brandon Sanderson. So it's the second book in the Mistborn trilogy. I can't really get into the second one, obviously, but the book in general, it's high fantasy, group of ragtag thieves, criminals of various sorts and various backgrounds kind of come together to bring down the final empire. There's like infiltrating court, there's all this politicking going on, there's all these different groups warring, and yeah, it's a good time. So the second book in the trilogy really stands out more to me for the friendship base than the first, because the first is them developing, where the second is kind of seeing them more fleshed out. It's just every friendship in there is an unlikely friendship. They're coming from different classes, different backgrounds, different age groups, different genders, different cities, different experiences, different morals, different political views. Everything about them is different. They really have nothing in common other than wanting to bring down this empire. And it kind of bonds them beyond that, and they're able to look at each other and appreciate not only what they can do for the group, but who they are as a person. I just found it very well-rounded. Specifically, if I had to highlight one, Vin and Osair, they're so cute. They're so cute. They overcome prejudice and basically like a form of like racism or speciesism, an entire misunderstanding of judgment and morality. Just kind of everything. They just overcome this and they create this like really great friendship and kind of withstands a lot of tests. Again, can't get into really much of it because it is the second in the series, but I would recommend that series overall, and definitely they are unlikely friends. Question 8 is on The Naked Time by John Black, and the question is, what would an uninhibited you be like? So I'm gonna take this in terms of like uninhibited by obstacles sort of thing. If there was no obstacles or, you know, societal boundaries or barriers in my way, kind of what would I do? I would be an absolute nomad. I would belong to nowhere, which, I mean, that's why Addie really, that was a good book for me to read, but I'd belong to nowhere and I'd kind of just appreciate the world as a whole. I love to travel. I love experiencing different cultures. I love seeing how other people think, because there's no way that one culture has everything right. So I really love diversifying in that sense, seeing what's out there and what more there is to offer the world outside of one kind of cultural thought or one kind of train of thought. So if I was unbound and uninhibited, I would just travel forever. I would go to the most random, weirdest, obscurest places and I'd stay there for 9 months. And the world's fascinating to me and I don't want to live forever, so I gotta make the most of my time now. So choosing a book for this was really hard, because if a character is entirely uninhibited, that would be kind of boring to read about. A book that starts with the vibes that I just said is a romance, and it's How to Kiss Your Best Friend. It's a childhood friends to lovers story. It was actually really cute. It's a clean, there's no spice, it's a clean romance. It's basically like, that's her vibe. She's a travel journalist. Her dad was a travel journalist, so she doesn't really have any roots anywhere, and she's just spent the last however many years traveling, writing, experiencing the world, all of this. And she's come to her mother's home to kind of pack up and clean up, and she runs into basically her childhood best friend, and they kind of kick things off from there. It's so cute, but also kind of picks up at the end of what I was saying. So she's kind of past that point in her life. She's looking to settle down, kind of like grow those roots I was saying that I don't want to have. She's looking to grow those, but it was an interesting perspective to see. It was a very cute story, and he's a competitive kayaker, which was fun. So go check that one out. So 7 is based off of the episode Tomorrow is Yesterday by DC Fontana. And the question is just a fun episode. What are some of your favorite sorts of bookish fun? What's your current go-to for non-bookish fun? So bookish fun is very easy, because it's reading, it's collecting books, it's organizing my shelves, it's making my booktube content, it's making Instagram reels and my book reviews and, you know, stories, and interacting with everyone on these book platforms. That to me is so much fun, and I thought it was going to be fun going in. Like, it looks fun from like the other point of view. And then I started my own, and it is so much more fun than I anticipated. So definitely that. I absolutely love being on here. I absolutely love talking about books. I absolutely love when people like reach out and be like, hey, you mentioned this book, I read it, I loved it, or I hated it. I love it. I live for that. So that's definitely my main bookish fun. For non-bookish fun, I love to travel, as I said before, so I try to travel as much as possible, but, you know, with time off from work, time off from school, and the funds to do so, it is limited. But anything really, from a weekend camping to going to see my friend in the next city over, to big trips. I just love to explore new places and try to understand how other people view the world and how their thought processes work, and how a language like affects their thought and everything. And I just love it. I love it so much. So this past year I did a week in New York. I went to Egypt and Jordan. I went to Guatemala. I've done a couple like small camping trips. Some point in the summer, my friend and I are going to go to the mountains, and we're going to go hike for a couple days. Other than that, I don't have anything really planned moving forward. I would love to go to Korea or Indonesia. Those are kind of the next two on my bucket list per se. So a book that's kind of about books, I would say Beach Read by Emily Henry. This book is so cute, so cute. It's contemporary romance. It's kind of like second chance enemies to lovers, not even enemies, academic rivals to kind of lovers. So they went to university together, and she didn't feel like he valued her work or her effort, and he had a big thing for her. So yeah. Anyways, flash forward a few years, they're both best-selling authors essentially, and they end up in the same town with writer's block the same summer, and they're next door neighbors. So to kind of both overcome their writer's block, they decide to swap genres. So she is a romance writer, and she switches with him for horror, and she tries to write a horror book, and he tries to write a romance book. And to kind of show them each their own process, she takes him out on dates to be like, this is what romance is, and he takes her out on like research. He's like researching this cult locally, so he takes her on his like research and interviews kind of thing. And it's just really cute and super fun, and they're both like writing books and everything. So that is my suggestion for bookish fun in a book. So question 6 episode is The Trouble with Tribbles by David Gerrold. And the question is, Tribbles are basically born pregnant, so that's something in the show, didn't know that. But also thinking about that, what's your relationship to the birds and the bees? Do you have kids? If so, how much and in what ways? Do they hate you? And if not, why not? I don't have kids. I'm still in university. So yeah, nope, that's an easy question for me. No kids. And for the book, I read a lot of YA, so technically all the characters in there are kids because they're young adults. They're generally like teenagers. But I couldn't just like recommend my whole like YA collection for you, so I figured I would go with a kind of trope around kids or like involving kids, and that's the single parent romance trope, and I love the single parent romance trope. Why? I don't know. I really don't. But that's what we're going with. I just read this one, but it is Unbreak Me, and it is actually a MMMF. So it's a polyamorous, kind of, no sword crossing romance. 3 male love interests, 1 girl. She's in her like early to mid 20s, which is same as me, except she has a 5-year-old daughter and is fleeing a domestic abuse relationship. So her life is very, very different from mine, but we're virtually the same age. So reading that was like really stressing me out because I was like, wow, like this could be me, this could be one of my friends, like, wow, we lead very different lives. And I was just kind of like watching her do her thing and protect her daughter and all these things, and I was like, wow, good for you, because it could never be me. I don't have the strength. Wow. So I just really felt for her. I absolutely loved her. I loved her effort and her struggles and everything. Just it just made it like a more real. But essentially, yeah, that's the story. So she is married to an older guy. They have a daughter together. He's abusive and ends up breaking the child's arm, and that's her last straw. So she takes the child and runs, and she only has something like $93 to her name and a quarter tank of gas when she goes. She, through a series of events, ends up working at these guys' house, and she's their cleaner slash cook sort of thing, but it gives her and her daughter a place to stay and some income. And those 3 just happen to be military brothers. So they're not brothers by blood, but they were serving in the same unit together, and they got honorably discharged after an incident, and now they're just kind of all coping with the trauma in their own ways and dealing kind of with their own scars. The kid in that one was absolutely adorable. Watching her interact with the guys' dog was amazing. Watching her interact with all 3 of the love interests and like her different relationships with each of them. So cute. Okay, so question 5 is based off of the Galileo 7 episode by Oliver Crawford. And the question's probably the hardest one in this video, but it's, what's the most desperate long odds gamble that you've made in your life? I'm not that old, so there hasn't been that many of them, to be honest, but I guess I was a competitive athlete, and I'm from a pretty small town, so if I wanted to stay in the competitive stream and get scouted for university, I had to move hours and hours away. And at 14, I decided 3 days before tryouts that I was going to do it and I was going to make the move. So I packed a duffel bag, packed my gear, and left. And yeah, then I didn't come home for 8 months. And then I did that for a couple of years. And then the year I would have been scouted for university, or like would have been like my age to be scouted, I decided that I was done with the sport and I wanted something new, so I packed up my bags again and I moved across the world to Europe, and I lived in Europe for a year. So yeah, I would say my 14 probably was my long odds gamble, because you know how many people are in the sport and I was hoping to be scouted kind of thing. But I also feel like just running away to Europe was also like a desperate move on my part. So I don't really know. One of those 2, whatever you think is more of the desperate long odds gamble, go for it. But I would say those are the 2 that best fit from my life in here. Now for a book, I know this is so like well known, but I could not think of a better book for this question other than The Hunger Games. Oh my god, Katniss's moment of standing up for her sister and volunteering, there is not a more desperate, more long odds gamble than doing that right there. So if you don't know, The Hunger Games, also a movie trilogy now, but it is a YA dystopian, and essentially the world's broken up into 12 factions and 1 capital, and all the wealth and the power is held at the capital. And then for the capital to maintain control, every year they host, or every couple years, anyways, they host a game basically of survival of the fittest from 2 kids from each of the districts. So 24 of these kids, all under 18, go into essentially a war dome, and they have to survive the elements and also kill each other, and then the last one standing wins and is the only one that gets to live. So obviously not many people want to compete in this. And then the main character, on her the like choosing day, her little sister's name gets drawn, and she kind of just loses it, and she stands up and she says, I volunteer, I will take my sister's place. And so she volunteers to go into this war dome and essentially die, but she's fighting to survive because her mother is useless, essentially. And her sister's quite young, and she has been the sole kind of breadwinner for her family, the only reason her family has really lived, and she doesn't have a lot of faith that her family will make it without her. So she's trying to get back to them, and she wants to win. But also she's not trained for this, and she's really not equipped for this, and I mean, no kids are. I would say, without a doubt, that is the longest gamble I've ever read. Absolutely loved it. If you haven't read the series, definitely read it. Okay, so the fourth question is based off of the Amok Time episode by Theodore Sturgeon. Don't know if I said that right, but it's an episode that ends with a knockdown fight. Do you have any experience in unarmed combat? Have you ever been in a fight as an adult? No, I've never been in a fight. In terms of books though, I have so many for this because I love sparring scenes. I live for a good sparring scene with like sarcastic banter. Gets me every single time. So I will look for that trope, so I have a lot that could fit in here. But I would say the ones that stick out in my head as like make me smile the most is the From Blood and Ash series, which is a fantasy romance kind of series. I freaking love her fight scenes. So some of them are arms, some of them are swords and daggers, some of them are just fisticuffs. It is just so much fun. Her banter is always on point. I can imagine the battle scenes in my head. I can see all the characters like moving and flowing, and it's just great. It's just great. All of them. I stand by all of them. Is a fantasy series around this girl who has been deemed the maiden by the leaders of society. So she has been veiled and locked up her whole life because she's to be given to the gods, but we don't really know what that means. Then she essentially ends up as a pawn between these two major groups. Both of them are like fantasy creatures, which I can't explain what, but she ends up as a pawn basically between both of them. And I just love her. I just love the main character so much. The world building is really fun. The banter is on point. Her thoughts in her own head, I just love. She's also very stabby, and I love me a stabby female main character. Yes. And it's one of my favorite series ever, so everyone should check this out, for sure. Question 3 is on Side of Paradise. The question is, more inhibitions being stripped away. Have you ever walked out of paradise? If so, do you ever regret it? Nope. I've been very fortunate this far in life. I think everything has its positive and negative, so I can't really say I gave up paradise or walked away from it at some point. So, I'm just gonna go with no for that question. But a book, okay? I immediately thought of this one. It is The Eternity Cure, and it's the second in the Blood of Eden series. It's a fantasy YA series I read years ago that I absolutely adore. And so it's a dystopian vampire series. So essentially all humans are controlled by the vampire population, and they're cattle for these vampires. And there's a girl that grew up kind of in the slums, and she gets turned into a vampire very early on, but she hates vampires, of course. So she's trying to morally deal with herself and morally like live, quote unquote, with her new identity, and wondering how she can use this new power to kind of support her old human morals and walk that line. You want to talk about walking out of paradise? Read the second book, okay? There is not a more direct way to answer this. I can't say anymore because, again, it's the second in the series, but yeah, she gave up a lot to be who she is. Number 2 is based off of the episode Who Mourns for Adonis? And the question is, Greek myth retellings are still all the rage. Do you have any favorites? Yes. But it's a loose retelling, okay? But there's always neon gods, which is a Greek retelling in a degree. This is a very, very spicy, probably more spice than, definitely more spice than plot, romance novel. Essentially, the world of it is they have the Greek hierarchy, but it's not gods. People are elected into these roles. So aside from Zeus, Hades, and Poseidon, which are all kind of by blood, like handed down father to son, all the other gods are elected officials that run different areas. So it's all kind of like loosely attached to what the god represents is what these elected officials then run for the city, which I thought was a really cool system. Now this story, because it is a series and they all follow kind of like different characters in the Greek world, but this one follows Persephone and Hades, and Persephone is now in an arranged marriage to Zeus, who is a psychopath, and arranged by her mother because her mother wants more power. And so she runs away and she flees to the underworld, which is basically just across the river. She runs into Hades and she says, hey, I propose a deal. You hate Zeus. They have some history. You hate Zeus and I hate Zeus, so let's basically give him the middle finger by having sex in a crowded room. He's just kind of like, that's your first plan? And she's like, yep. So yeah, it's fun, it's spicy, it's a time and a half, and I absolutely love them together. And then number 1 is based on the episode City on the Edge of Forever by Harlan Ellison. And the question is, what is the best book you've read this year? Renegades by Marissa Mayer. It is definitely the one that has taken up the most space in my brain, definitely the one I kind of keep coming back to when I want to mull over ideas and think things through. It has been featured in my last couple videos, but essentially it is kind of a YA sci-fi fantasy dystopian kind of vibes, and it follows your 2 protagonists, and one is the daughter of the supervillains and the other is the son of the superheroes. And this world is currently controlled by superheroes, but used to be controlled by supervillains. And she wants to bring back the era of the supervillain, and she thinks the best way to go about this is by infiltrating headquarters and taking them down from the inside. So that's what she does. And she ends up on the team with, of course, the son of the main superheroes. And just kind of seeing their morals play with each other while knowing that they're on opposite sides. It was just really interesting to see how those debates were like going out. It raises a lot of good questions about involvement and independence and morality and where the line is, and I love. It was the perfect like mix for me of everything. Comic books, but superhero movies, but also a really good like novel. It has this like cheesy names, but it's well thought out plot and like developed characters, and it's so good. It's literally so good. So I would say this is definitely my best book of the year so far. And feel free to comment down below on what your best book of the year has been so far, because I still have 6 months left, so I need to add things to the list. And that concludes the Star Trek book tag. So a lot of fun to film this, a lot of fun going through and trying to find books for all of these questions. But I love being tagged in videos because, you know what, they challenge my thinking and they challenge all the books that I've ever read and make me have to actually reflect on them and think about them. So thank you so much for the tag, Randy Ray. And for anybody else that wants to do the video, I will leave all the questions in my caption, and I will link Randy Ray's video so you can check out all his answers. But other than that, don't forget to like and subscribe. I post videos every Friday and sometimes on Tuesdays when I'm feeling like it, so ring that bell for notifications, and I'll catch you guys on the next one. Bye!